Welcome back to our third week of Remember I Am, our series on the 4 yogas. This week we're diving into my personal favorite, Bhakti Yoga. And when we look at the 4 yogas, we have two basically feminine-oriented approaches of karma and bhakti, and two basically masculine-oriented approaches of raja and jnana. So you will see many similarities between Bhakti Yoga and Karma Yoga from last week. But Bhakti Yoga is the yoga of love, or supreme devotion. It represents the yin polarity, whereas jnana represents the yang polarity. Love and wisdom, feminine and masculine. These are the two basic aspects of God's nature. So we will be spending the next week learning and practicing the way of bhakti, the yoga of divine love and supreme devotion. The heart of bhakti yoga is simply becoming love. Because if God is love, then the mind must eventually melt into that love if it is to become self-realized. So turning one's life into a love offering to God is truly the yoga of Christ, the way of union, and the practice of bhakti. And bhakti yoga is also represented by the element of fire, as divine love acts as a kind of all-consuming fire that burns up all the latent karmas in the system and anything that stands in the way of union. A fire can be used to cook a delicious meal, or it can be used to kill someone. A person's love for selfish gain can cause them to lie, steal, and kill, while a person's love for God can heal entire nations. So Bhakti Yoga looks to use this intense fire of divine love to burn away all the illusions of the ego and all sense of separation. Because the Bhakta knows that God is everywhere and in everything, it treats everything as an act of worship to the beloved. Everything from sleeping to waking is done with excellence, with mindfulness and devotion, as a fragrant oil poured upon the feet of the Master. So in this way, turning all actions into an act of love and worship to God is another way to remove the sense of personal doership. The Bhakta says, "It is no longer I that live, but love that lives in me." The other 3 yogas are essentially paths of renunciation. Raja Yoga renounces all identification with the mind. Karma Yoga renounces all identification with the body. And Jnana Yoga makes the most difficult renunciation of all, as it renounces the world of duality altogether. However, Bhakti Yoga renounces nothing, but rather embraces everything. The Bhakta does not renounce personal desires, but simply turns them into an act of worship to God, and in doing so, eventually loses all interest in them. Once you have tasted the kiss of divine love, all the pleasures of the world combined become like dust and worms at your feet. So, forcing yourself to give up worldly attachments is not true devotion or true bhakti yoga. You cannot move away from ego unless you see something greater to move towards. So even our attachments can be turned into objects of worship. Every puff of the cigarette, every sip of the alcohol can remind you of the pleasure of God. Every bite of the donut or the ice cream can show you how sweet God tastes. And in doing this, God becomes the focus, and material objects slowly begin to lose their pull, because you're no longer doing everything to satisfy a separate self, but simply to experience union with God through everything. This is a very powerful way to overcome unhealthy habits and addictions, because you cannot suppress what the mind longs for without amplifying it. Suppressing attachments breeds more attachment, but Loving God is like smelling a sweet fragrance that takes the ego's attention off of sense objects and turns it inwards towards the self. So, becoming love in human form is the goal of Bhakti Yoga, because in that divine love, the beauty of all things is seen and exalted, and everything speaks of the Creator's love. God becomes the one all-consuming desire of the heart. So there really is no effort or renunciation at all in true Bhakti Yoga. After all, when you're in love with someone, does anyone have to remind you to think about your lover? Does it take any effort at all to be with them? And when you're apart from them, doesn't every cell in your body ache to be with them again? And even that intense aching of the separation you feel has a kind of sweetness to it. So turning up this intense longing for God is the goal of Bhakti Yoga, because it will eventually result in self-realization. The Bhakta pursues a state called divine madness. It is the state of total God intoxication, where the heart burns for God to such an extent that God is experienced in everything, which annihilates all sense of separation. Through the passion of divine love, the Bhakta merges with the very act of devotion until it feels like it has become devotion itself. So when the Bhakta becomes lost in burning madness for the divine, the ego is consumed in that divine madness. And this is why when Christ was asked, "Lord, what is the greatest commandment of them all?" Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength." This is the essence of bhakti. As love grows and the heart chakra opens, so does the experience of beauty. Beauty is the experience of love, and so each taste of beauty becomes like a kiss from the beloved. The great Swami Vivekananda wrote about this divine madness in his book titled Parabhakti. "Just one kiss of thy lips, O beloved, and my thirst for thee increases forever. To him who has been blessed with such a kiss, the whole of nature changes, worlds vanish, suns and moons die out, and the universe itself melts away into that one infinite ocean of love." So herein lies the true gift of Bhakti Yoga. We want to understand reality so badly, but understanding is not the ultimate prize. Loving reality is the pearl of great price, the foundation of all happiness and joy. So knowing this, the Bhakta chooses to do something profoundly radical, to love absolutely everything, because an open heart cannot suffer. To love anything is to honor it for the place it is serving in creation, knowing that everything is allowing for the Creator to know itself.
Reality is love, for the reason that reality is relationship. Everything depends on everything else, and nothing can exist separate or alone in this universe. So to see any part of reality as separate is suffering. To see reality as one is happiness and love. So the phrase God is love means that in order to know reality, you have to love it first. Love comes before understanding, not the other way around. And this is the entire premise of Bhakti Yoga, becoming a lover of reality. When we choose to see love in everything, we teach the mind that nothing is separate from itself. And this is why it is said that perfect love casts out all fear. Fear is separation, as love is oneness. The dualistic mind can only learn of oneness through the experience of love. This is why love is the very force that motivates the evolution of consciousness, which makes it the most powerful tool for spiritual expansion. There are three main powers that love carries that causes consciousness to expand. The first power that love gives to consciousness is one-pointedness. It makes the way to God straight and narrow, as having an intense desire for God eliminates all other distractions to spiritual seeking. The second power that love brings is the burning away of karma, as love brings the mind to the ultimate truth of oneness. Love is the strongest frequency in the universe. So by keeping the mind dwelling always upon love, it begins to rapidly heal the mind and purify it of distortions, which eliminates karma. And the third power that love carries for consciousness is shared giving. A Course in Miracles says, "The law of heaven states that giving and receiving are the same thing. Therefore, by offering freedom, you will be free." This is how love causes consciousness to polarize rapidly. When love is given to anyone, it causes the consciousness of the giver to expand. Because in your perception in that moment, you are not serving a person, you are serving the one self, and so you gain whatever you give. Love gives life to the giver and the receiver, and so it can be seen that love is the way, the truth, and the life. Love is the most powerful consciousness expanding force in the universe. Divine love is as strong as death, for it kills just as surely as death kills.
There is nothing greater for the expansion of consciousness than these three powers that love carries. But we are typically so eager to learn more information and collect more spiritual knowledge and wisdom, which is a very good and right thing to do, of course. But without love, all of that knowledge profits us nothing. In fact, the ego will always weaponize spiritual knowledge against us when it does not come with an equal amount of love for God. Many people I know, including myself at one point, essentially learned themselves into a dark night of the soul because we give the ego so much ammunition to use against us without protecting our hearts with the great armor of love. No amount of wisdom or knowledge can compensate for a lack of love, because without it, we are left feeling empty, purposeless, and lost. All of our wisdom and knowledge profits us nothing, because wisdom carries no power to transform when it is delivered without love. But far greater is the message of one who demonstrates love than 1,000 words of perfect philosophy spoken. All spiritual virtues come naturally and easily in love, without having to learn a single concept or study any ancient scriptures. And so here's the final important point for your bhakti yoga practice for this week. Love knows no bargaining and seeks no reward. So true devotion cannot be transactional. You cannot do it with the hopes of getting anything out of it, even freedom. Because as long as you're loving God with the expectation of getting some favors in return, then you'll stop loving God the moment you believe that those favors aren't coming soon enough. You must love God simply because God is lovable and God is truth. It has to be pure, unconditional love, in the same way that a mother does not give to her child with the expectation of receiving something in return. The love that she gives is her joy, and she receives it back by giving it to her child. So bhakti cannot lead to enlightenment if it contains any form of transaction. It must be completely pure. The bhakta is a lover of reality. So whatever reality delivers is accepted as a gift from the beloved. To the pleasures and beauty of life, the bhakta says, "Ah, how sweet is my lover's kiss." To the trials and challenges of life, the Bhakta says, "This has come to teach me patience, kindness, and forgiveness, that I may become even more like my beloved." If misery and pain comes, the Bhakta says, "Welcome, misery and pain. You are also from the beloved." If death comes, the Bhakta says, "Welcome, death. Take me home now to be with my lover." To all experiences of life, the Bhakta says, "Blessed am I that they all come to me." This may seem like a very radical practice, and from the world's line of reasoning, it is very radical, maybe even insane. But divine madness is exactly what the Bhakta pursues: to become completely lost in divine ecstasy, where everything belongs to God, and the heart becomes an eternal fountain of love. In this way, love never comes at a cost. One person might look at this practice and say, "This is madness. You can't just love everything. If you love everything, then why not just love alcohol and tobacco and smoke and drink yourself to death?" But the Bhakta cannot do this, because that would be very unloving treatment towards the body. God never loves one thing at the expense of another thing. So when everything is seen equally as God, then everything is kept in perfect harmony and balance. The Bhakta sees the love of God in everything. So even to the alcoholic, the Bhakta says, "Look at how that man loves God by how much he drinks. I love that his alcoholism will eventually teach him that God alone can satisfy his thirst. His karma is perfect, and he should suffer from it. Why not? Let a man feel pain that he has not reached the highest, and that pain will eventually be to his salvation, in this life or the next." Radical? Absolutely. But the more radical the practice, the more radical the results. So our mantra for this week will be, "I am love." Put this mantra on your smartphone and repeat it to yourself unceasingly. I am love. I am love. I am love. To remind yourself to love absolutely everything that comes your way this week. To the best of your ability, choose to see God in everything and treat everything your hand finds to do as an act of worship. Make everything and anything a love offering to God, and be with your beloved in your heart always. And your big practice is, at least once per day, choose to perform an act of service for someone else, with absolutely no other motive other than to bless them. See them as yourself in another body, and want for their highest joy and happiness. It could be as simple as a compliment to a stranger, or helping a friend out with something. It could also be visiting a prisoner, feeding a hungry person, or giving money to somebody in need. You can do as many acts of service as you want, but no less than once per day. So keep your eyes open and look for opportunities to become love in action. Let your heart guide you when and how to serve, but allow yourself to experience God in reality through service to others. For God is love, and therefore, so am I.